My name is Darrell Sloan, author of I Universe, Demolishing and Rebuilding Spirituality for a Scientific Age. Details in the description, if that interests you. Sorry folks, that is something I'm going to start doing at the beginning of each video that I make, particularly videos about books. As an author published by a small press, marketing is difficult, if not impossible. So I got to take every opportunity to get the word out about my book. So BookTube and making BookTube videos, book reviews, I'm going to start talking about my book just momentarily at the beginning of those videos. It's something that Brian Lee Durfee has done, so it's something that I'm going to do as well, okay? But we're not here to talk about my book. We're here to talk about Ray Bradbury's book, Something Wicked This Way Comes, which I have just read on the Kindle. I have read a few of Ray Bradbury's books before. I've read Fahrenheit 451, which would be my favorite. The Martian Chronicles, which I'd probably put in second place. A few of his short story collections. And now Something Wicked This Way Comes, which I think is maybe his fourth or fifth novel. Written in 1962. Whereas his first novel, The Martian Chronicles, was 1950. So yeah. He's well known for short stories, but he hasn't written a huge amount of novels in comparison to someone like Stephen King, who's written like what, about 80 or something like that, maybe more. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 novels, but tons of short stories. But I think Ray Bradbury's reputation as a master of the craft of writing is well deserved. Fahrenheit 451 was such a prophetic and insightful book. So, we're going to talk about Something Wicked This Way Comes. I was really surprised a couple of years ago. I spotted a Goodreads review by my author friend Philip Henry, who gave the book 1 out of 5. And he talked about the really flowery prose and the overuse of similes and stuff like that. And he just couldn't get on board with it. I think his criticism is valid if it is a criticism, because the book has I'm calling it flowery prose. I don't know what else to call it. It's very poetic. But there's a certain skill in doing it. I'll maybe read you just from the very beginning of the book to give you a flavour of how this goes. Let's see. So the prologue begins. First of all, it was October, a rare month for boys. Not that all months aren't rare, but there be bad and good, as the parrots say. Take September, a bad month, school begins. Consider August, a good month, school hasn't begun yet. July, well, July's really fine. There's no chance in the world for school. June, no doubting it. June's best of all, for the school doors spring wide and September's a billion years away. But you take October now. School's been on a month and you're riding easier in the reins, jogging along. You got time to think of the garbage you'll dump on Old Man Pricket's porch, or the hairy ape costume you'll wear to the YMCA the last night of the month. And if it's around October 20th and everything's smoky smelling and the sky orange and ash grey at twilight, it seems Halloween will never come in the fall of broomsticks and a soft flap of bedsheets around corners. But one strange, wild, dark, long year, Halloween came early. One year Halloween came on October the 24th, 3 hours after midnight. Okay, that's a pretty interesting beginning. Could it be written in a more succinct way? Yeah. That's probably not a great example of the poetic prose. Let's see. Okay, the beginning of chapter 1 then. The seller of lightning rods arrived just ahead of the storm. He came along the street of Greentown, Illinois, in the late cloudy October day, sneaking glances over his shoulder. Somewhere not so far back, Vast lightnings stomped the earth. Somewhere a storm like a great beast with terrible teeth could not be denied. So the salesman jangled and clanged his huge leather kit, in which oversized puzzles of ironmongery lay unseen, but which his tongue conjured from door to door until he came at last to a lawn which was cut all wrong. No, not the grass. The salesman lifted his gaze, but two boys far up the gentle slope, lying on the grass. Of a like size and general shape, the boys sat carving twig whistles, talking of olden or future times, content with having left their fingerprints on every movable object in Greentown during summer past, and their footprints on every open path between there and the lake and there and the river since school began. It's a kind of a strange way of writing, isn't it? But something about it works. And the more I read this book, the way Bradbury writes this conjures a kind of dreamlike quality. And there were times that I was a little frustrated with the way the prose was structured and how poetic it was. There were times where I had to reread paragraphs. There were times where I kind of just thought, well, I didn't get that paragraph, but I'm just going to keep reading on because I just wanted to get on with the story. But for the most part, it all kind of works. It's just different from Fahrenheit 451 and the Martian Chronicles, which are fairly, I wouldn't say plain, because Bradbury is quite an artistic writer, but this was, poetry in overdrive, if you like, if that makes any sense. Anyway, what is the story? Well, our principal characters are Will Holloway and Jim Nightshade, two boys of about 12 years old. Will is the sensible, level-headed one. Jim is much more adventurous, much more easily tempted towards evil, perhaps. He's not a villainous character, but he's quite different from Will. And we're introduced to his more adventurous side, more mischievous side, early on in the story, where the lightning rod salesman gives these two boys a lightning rod, and he prophesies that Jim's house is going to be struck in the storm that's coming. So Will convinces Jim to put the lightning rod on top of his house so that the house will not be destroyed. But Jim doesn't want to. But he does anyway because of Will is being forceful about it, so he puts it up. But later that night he climbs back out onto the roof and takes it down because he wants to experience what would it be like if my house got struck by lightning. So that's kind of Jim's nature, He's also very impatient to grow up. He's frustrated by being 12, and that forms part of the backbone of the story. Where there's a lot of talk about, it gets quite philosophical in places, about growing older. How when you're young you can't wait to grow up, but when you're middle-aged you long for being younger again. And a really important character that comes into the book, who doesn't seem that important initially, but he is Charles Holloway, Will's father, who is like 54, I think. So I'm just 50, so I can kind of feel somewhat how Charles Holloway feels about life, and he becomes such an important character. There's a point in the novel where he gives this big speech, but it's so the way it's written, I was just thinking that no one would ever talk like that. But I just went with it because the whole thing had a kind of dreamlike quality. The whole story has a dreamlike quality that I really loved feeling immersed in. And that's another thing. Quite frequently when I'm reading novels, I'm kind of just wanting to get on with it. Get on with it. I've got a large TBR. I want to get on to the next one, which is not a good way to feel because, you got to be present with the novel to fully enjoy it. And I found it very easy to be present with this. I really enjoyed being immersed in it. So that's why it maybe didn't bother me so much, the flowery prose that was slowing down the pace of everything and making some parts slightly difficult to read, because I just loved the immersion. I wasn't trying to rush ahead and get it over and done with. The setting is small town America in the 1960s. And I think this is an important novel because childhood is so different now for kids than it was then, and how it was for me in the late 70s and early 80s. It feels, my experience as a child feels more like these boys than it does, I think, the modern child who is overly protected, who's not allowed to run free and, you know, run through the woods on his own or with his friends and get up to things. And where it's kind of like, you know, just make sure you're home before it's dark, this kind of thing. I mean, I kind of remember the attitude of being allowed to run free as a kid. Rightly or wrongly, it's not like that anymore. And yes, I know there was far less awareness of, shall we say, predatory humans when I was a kid. Although I've had the experience as a 10-year-old of having someone in their teens come up to me and hold a hatchet above my head, put the point of a knife against my back and say, "Hey boy, come on over here with us." Most terrifying experience of my life. But it was done purely for effect. When I started to cry, the guy laughed and he ran back to his friends. So cruel, yes, but terrifying for me. And yeah, we have a sense in this book that life is not really that safe for boys running around. So no spoilers or anything, but just to give you a flavour of the structure of the story, it's about a carnival that comes to town in the middle of the night, and Will and Jim hear the train coming, and they sneak out of their houses in the dead of night and run across town to the field which has the rail tracks going across it where the train has stopped, and they see the carnival being set up. But they end up seeing more than they're supposed to, and it invites great trouble into their lives. That's probably all I'll say about that. But yeah, the principal villain is a man called Mr. Dark, who's also known as the Illustrated Man. Yep, if you've ever read the short story collection, The Illustrated Man, which I think was published over a decade before this, The Illustrated Man is a character in that collection, and here he is back again as a carnival owner. Yeah, interesting. But I really loved the feel. I really loved immersing myself in that lost sense of childhood that is no longer around anymore. That I partially knew. I mean, I think things were a bit more controlled in my life than they were in the lives of Will and Jim in this story. But it was fun to revisit that. It felt very much like it was when I read Stephen King's It. Maybe also The Body, which was filmed as Stand By Me, although that story has a very depressing kind of backbone to it, which I don't like. I kind of feel like we got to get out of this dead-end town kind of thing, whereas it's not like that at all in Something Wicked This Way Comes. That phrase, "Something Wicked This Way Comes," is Shakespearean. The full line is, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes." That was spoken by the Weird Sisters in Macbeth. Yeah, I vaguely remembered that, but it was stated explicitly in the introduction to the book, or to the afterword to the book. Yeah. Or also Will's father uses that expression in the story. Yeah. But yeah, the thing I want to draw attention to, and I mentioned it in passing there, was the existential side of the novel. Getting older, pining for the younger days, that kind of thing is very important. And also the ability to, and this is really to do with Will's father more than anything, the ability to take stock of your life and all your egotistical comings and goings, and suddenly see the hilarity of it, the playfulness of it, to look upon life This is the way it's mentioned in the book. Life is a great prank. I resonate very deeply with that. Because, you know, we get up to all sorts of things, but in the background of your entire life, nothing actually lasts. You die. Your children die. The entire universe dies, ultimately. You know, there's just something hilarious about life. If you don't look at it hilarious, you'll get awfully depressed and frustrated and thinking, why does nothing last? You know? But it's just the nature of things. You have to accept it and see the funny side of it. And there is great power in that laughter. And that becomes something that's important to this story as well. So like I said, no spoilers, but I hope that piques your interest in a very fine novel by Ray Bradbury. I recommend it. 4 out of 5. Alright folks, till next time. Take care.
The sky